Yeah, welcome to How to Help Your Body Help Your Mind. So this is a talk that I've given before, a similar talk to one I've given before, and it was called The Science and Psychology of Polarization, or The Science and Psychology of Difficult Conversation. So yeah, I used to be a reporter, cameraman with Channel 4 News, and I made documentaries for the BBC and for Channel 4 after that. But I originally studied philosophy, and I was always really interested in kind of slightly deeper questions than I was able to cover on the news. And also, at the same time that I was doing the work for Channel 4 News and the BBC, I was doing a lot of kind of what you might call personal growth work, meditation, therapeutic work, tantra, loads of kind of weird stuff that you might put under the kind of heading of spiritual. I don't like that word very much, but it was sort of personal growth, exploration stuff. Whenever I go back to Channel 4 News, I always used to say I'd gone to a yoga retreat because I didn't want to explain where I'd actually been. And so I was really interested in kind of this nexus of like philosophy, personal growth, and current affairs, and also getting this sense that a lot of them are quite intertwined in that I think a lot of the questions that we're dealing with in the world, at the very least, have a psychological dimension. And at most, I think we're actually coming to a time where a lot of the old stories are running out, and we've all got a sense of the old stories are running out. I think we're actually starting to come to the point where you need these sort of deeper layers of philosophy and psychology, certainly, to start making sense of the world. And it's not, we're kind of coming out of a very rationalist paradigm, and I think something new is coming. So I left kind of traditional journalism and documentaries, and then started up my own YouTube channel about a year and a half ago called Rebel Wisdom. And we've got about 90,000 subscribers at the moment. We're going to have about 100,000 fairly soon. And alongside that, we also run workshops and personal growth retreats around some of the ideas in the films. So we look at topics like sovereignty, mindfulness, presence, which I'm going to come to in this talk. And we recently put out a series that a lot of the ideas that I'm going to share with you are linked to, called The Science and Psychology of Polarization. And I'm convinced that a lot of the things that come from, so this is Peter Levine, this is Dr. Stephen Porges, Gina Ross, they are people who kind of straddle the worlds of psychology and trauma and neuroscience and conflict prevention. And this sense that there's sort of very disparate ideas in different areas that are needing to sort of come together in a new synthesis. It's a very nascent area of trying to look at, okay, how do you apply this deeper psychological lens to politics and to cultural issues? And why this is such a crucial question is because this sense of polarization and this sense of conversations breaking down. How can we possibly even start to deal with any of the bigger social and cultural issues if the conversations about them keep breaking down? And this sense of polarization increasing, and especially on social media, but also pretty much everywhere. There's a lot of focus now on, okay, how do we even have generative conversations, and why do these conversations keep breaking down? And I think there is something in the zeitgeist. There's a book, How to Have Impossible Conversations by Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay. So that came out in America 2 days ago. It's coming out in the UK in about 3 weeks, something like that. And I've interviewed Peter and interviewed James for films that we're putting out in the next few days. And it's a really interesting book. There's a really useful set of arguments in there, tactics taken from hostage negotiation, from kind of ninja level, cult deprogramming tactics, all of these, like how do you have positive conversations? How do you have conversations where you're really interested in learning what the other person has to say, where you're avoiding getting defensive? And so it's really well written. It's a really good book. So this is a quote from the book. The way to change minds, influence people, build relationships, and maintain friendships is through kindness, compassion, and empathy, treating individuals with dignity and respect, and exercising those considerations in psychologically safe environments. Fantastic. But this is James Lindsay on Twitter, one of the authors. You're a bit thick, sir. Oh, you're one of those dipshits who confuse acts of terrorism. And I don't know if anyone here spends a lot of time on Twitter, but James Lindsay is kind of notorious for being combative and, being really combative on Twitter. So he's not actually... The question is, why is it so difficult for us to take our own advice? If we were to ask anyone, okay, how do we have positive conversations, we'd all give pretty much the same answer. You listen to people, you don't dismiss them. It's a little bit more difficult to do that in real life. Who here has ever had an argument before? If you didn't put your hand up, you can leave. You don't need to be here, so it's fine. Just if you could just put your hands back up again. Keep it up if it was in the last week. Keep it up if it was today. Great, we've got some experts in here. So the idea of these sessions in here is that they're a little bit more interactive and hopefully to give you some tips and tools. What I'd like you to do now, I know it's an English audience, but I'm going to ask you to talk to someone. Talk to the person next to you, ideally someone you don't know, and I'd like you to talk to that person about that argument that you had or the last argument that you had, but not about the topic. The topic's not important. What it is about how you felt, how you acted, and especially, how you reacted in that moment. What you thought about the other person, what you thought about yourself, what you maybe thought afterwards. So it's, and also just be aware of how you feel as you're talking about it as well, because that can be a really useful guide to kind of how we feel about these topics. So I'm going to ask you to find someone that you don't know to talk to for about a minute and a half or 2 minutes. If one person talks, the other person listens, and then we'll swap over in about a minute and a half. You just come to silence. So I just realized the other good reason for picking someone you don't know is that you might actually be here with the person you had that argument with. So don't want you to rehash that. If so, you might need to take it outside. So who would like to share just about what came up for them then as they were talking about it and how they felt in that argument? Anyone want to put their hand up and... Yep.
I've been making a really conscious effort to be really detached from the ideas I'm talking about, particularly on social media, to avoid being combative. Particularly when the topic is emotive or there's nuance in it. So I don't know whether that is a good thing or not. But
sounds like it. Why are you doing that? What used to happen then?
Because social media is fertile ground for ridiculous language. That often it kind of initially people don't really know where you're coming from. I've just started doing it, so I don't really have any solid ideas about what the results are going to be.
And you're doing that because you didn't always do that, or
because I find conversations on social media incredibly frustrating. Because people don't allow space for ideas outside their kind of dogmatic, entrenched position.
Yeah. Anyone else want to share about an in-person argument? That's really interesting, and we'll come to a little bit about social media in a second. Anyone want to share about an in-person argument? Yep, at the back. Just, you can decide between you. Don't have an argument.
Yeah, it might be the second one of today. More the fact that actually when we first put up our hands and you said, was it today, he put his hand down and my hand stayed up, because it was most definitely today. And then because I have very good extrasensual hearing, I could hear him actually talking about the argument which he put his hand down about in his conversation. So I can tell you that the content in terms of what we were discussing actually came back to a male-female dynamic. And I know we've talked a lot kind of throughout the last 2 days about gender, but actually how men and women receive and interact with opinions and how they express them, and how women can often feel to make their point or to express an opinion can come across as combative when received by different audiences, or women aren't as confident to make their points, and that when they do make their point, and it's received in a way that is diminished, and it's made to feel like their point has no value, particularly in an audience maybe where you actually have a bit more of an informed view than the general population, but the general population is the financial capital of the world and so doesn't really want to hear it, that you actually feel that you're being belittled, and that the space and the air in which you can express your own views is reduced, and therefore you will not express your view in future.
Yeah, who's familiar with that sort of sense of dismissal, kind of, and how that makes you feel, like just being dismissed? That's one of the key points that I'll come to in a minute. Thank you all for sharing. So yeah, I'm going to put up a few clips now from they're originally from the world of trauma and counselling, but I think it's safe to say that they pretty much revolutionized that world in the 70s and 80s.
For podcasts, talks, debates, courses and articles, visit the Institute of Art and Ideas. Click the link on screen now to iai.tv.